Hi! Frank Lloyd Bear and I are back to read you a couple more chapters of The Joyful Bear. Are you ready? Chapter 4, Before. This is an illustration showing some of my other stuffed animals that were not bears when I was little. When I was young, I had dozens of stuffed animals. In addition to bears, there were the usual dogs and cats and lambs, and there were also unusual ones, like an owl, a unicorn, and a pig. Every single one of them had a name, and I wrote elaborate lists and genealogies, documenting how they were related to each other. Some of them were downright realistic looking, like Hopsy, the squirrel puppet. When I was very small, shorter than the table, I would put her on my hand and reach up to make it look as though she was crawling along the edge of the table. At home, this was met with amusement, but the one time I did it to a grocery store clerk, she began shrieking at the top of her lungs, and my mother nearly died of embarrassment. My mother tried to keep the number of stuffed toys to a minimum, but my older brothers and sisters, and especially my father, kept giving them to me for every birthday and Christmas. Once I'd adopted a new critter and given him or her a name and a gender, there was no way to remove that one from my collection without feeling like I was an evil parent, rejecting my offspring. When I went away to college, I stored an entire footlocker of stuffed animals at my parents' house. "But you didn't call them that," Frankie interjects. "You're right, Frankie. The ones that weren't bears I called teddy animals because I found the term stuffed animal offensive." "So what happened to all those teddy animals?" asks Frankie. "Most of them got donated to thrift stores after I got out of college. A few are in storage, my two original bears, Theodore and Lee, and Hopsy." "I've never met them," says my bear. "They got quiet. They never talk anymore, I admit." The truth was they still had names, and they were associated with childhood memories, but they no longer had personalities. "That's terrible." Frankie hangs his head and looks sad. How did a room full of stuffed animals become a coterie of loving friends who brought so much happiness? Through the power of imagination. Imagination is not limited to children. We don't outgrow it. But as adults, we have more information about what is possible. If we focus on the negative, using our imagination to dwell on bad things that might happen, we become fearful and unhappy. To be happy adults, we need to keep imagining happy outcomes. We need to tune our thoughts and imagination towards the positive possibilities. A well-known example of this comes from Eleanor Porter's 1913 book, Pollyanna. Whenever something bad happens to the main character, which is often, she finds a uniquely positive spin on it. "You don't seem to see any trouble being glad about everything," retorted Nancy, choking a little over her remembrance of Pollyanna's brave attempts to like the bare little attic room. Pollyanna laughed softly. "Well, that's the game, you know, anyway." "The game?" "Yes. The just being glad game." Pollyanna explains that the game is to find something about everything to be glad about, no matter what. In the course of the book, Pollyanna spreads her glad philosophy to countless gloomy, grumpy adults. Over 100 years and 13 sequels later, the glad game is something we can all still play. Chapter 5, Arrival. That's the box he came in. By the time I was in my late 20s, I'd completely given up on bears as companions. I had a cuddly husband and a delightfully furry long-haired cat, and the two of them served as my live teddy animals. The three of us snuggled on the couch or in bed together, just like I'd snuggled my stuffed coterie as a child. But one day, depression descended on me like a black vulture, sitting on my shoulder. It was horrible. I couldn't function. I could only cry and be angry and feel like I had no reason for living. The cat tried sitting on my lap and purring, but I pushed her away. The husband tried similar methods, but with the same results. One day, an unexpected box arrived in the mail addressed to me. "That was me," cries Frankie. "I was in that box." When I opened the box, I found a snow-white bear with big black eyes looking up at me. He had a brown nose and a slightly shy smile, and his paws were open as if requesting a hug. There was a note inside from the bear. "Admission time," says Frankie. I had help writing that note. "I know," I say. "You haven't written me any notes since then." "Well, that's because I found I could talk to you directly. Besides, I'm not very good at holding a pen. I have terrible paw writing." The note said that this bear was on his way to the North Pole, but he got lost, and he needed a home. Could I provide a home for him? While I am dwelling on the amazing and generous gift that a dear friend sent, a teddy bear in a box, Frankie is dwelling on the amazing and generous gift that I gave him. "You gave me a home," he says, "one that was even better than the North Pole." The funny thing about gifts is that giving them away turns out to be a gift to yourself. You don't have to give expensive things. You don't have to give things at all. A hug is a gift. A smile is a gift. A word of encouragement is a gift. Noticing a stranger and complimenting them is a gift. If you make it a practice to give little gifts like this every single day, you'll receive them as well. Sometimes when we are generous in small, barely detectable ways, it can change someone else's life forever. Margaret Cho. That's it for today's chapters. I got something else I want to show you before we go. People in the town where I live, Dunedin, Florida, are putting teddy bears in their windows so that when kids go out for walks during the quarantine, they can look for teddy bears. So I found this little teddy bear. I have placed her in the window. She's looking out. And I had to put something underneath her to make sure she could see over the windowsill. And so I found a box of ping pong balls. Who else has a box of ping pong balls at their house? You have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.